I'm Jason Bischoff-Wurstle, the Director of Photo Archives here and the curator of Strange Times, Downtown New Haven in the COVID era, featuring the photography of Roderick Topping. This show opened in October of last year, 2021, and has enjoyed a successful run through next month, March of 2022. And the show itself, as the title mentions, takes place at the beginning of COVID and actually runs itself through even what was exciting about opening the show in October. We were putting up photos that were just taken even as recently as September, which gives us here at the museum, it's a different type of show because it's really a document of modern history, if you will, which is very exciting. It's also been really exciting to work with Roderick Topping, who is a local resident who's been casually taking photographs, wonderful work, for over 30 years, documenting the city. And as you'll find through our conversation, just delightful person, wonderful eye to detail, and really passion that speaks through in his work. So this project has been really a beacon, at least for me, to work on through these tough times. And I hope that people can reflect on that, and also at the same time reflect on kind of where we are as a city, as a community, and possibly where we're going, because who really knows? And we're really lucky to have Paul DUDA joining us today. Paul is a local photographer and a resident of New Haven, runs Studio DUDA, fine art photography studio located in Worcester Square, and he's run that since 1992. Paul has degrees from Pennsylvania State University and the Pratt Institute, and he's internationally known for his photography work and is shown around the world, Istanbul, Prague, the Czech Republic, New York City, all around the world, and he has been a fine arts photography instructor as well for over 30 years. So, and again, a resident and friend to New Haven. So it's really wonderful to have you join us today, Paul, and to have Rod here. And let's get into the discussion. So thank you all for tuning in. And remember to subscribe to YouTube for more New Haven Museum online content.
So I was going to start this presentation by going through the gallery in order, but to me, there's something about photography when it's in a space and the way that it reacts in a space, and how the windows play as a separation for elements, and how light is different in certain areas, and how images are on top and below each other. So I'm going to kind of look at it in a different way. I'm breaking down the work a different way, which I think opens up a great ability for people to come look at the work itself and see how it's placed, together. Superb organization in the way that you guys looked at each picture. You became a Eugene Smith, where you understood that one photograph does affect another photograph, and using that understanding in the way that it fits within the room itself. Anyway, so Jason, in talking with you a little bit and getting some information, you mentioned, this show doesn't seem to be kind of straight aesthetics for you of an artist's work, but it's more of a kind of personal nature. You even mentioned the idea of the death of a city. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it's not clearly aesthetics. It's a mix of it all, and I guess it's kind of the feeling. Anytime I put together a show, I feel like it's like anything. You record an album, you make a movie, whatever. Any sort of artistic enterprise of sorts, you're going to leave an imprint, a personal imprint. And so, like, my feeling with the show, when we stepped back and put this together because, yes, these were photos taken during what we deem the COVID era, even though here we are, phase 3 of COVID, if you will. But it really, for me, it's not just, okay, it was never about, here's the frightening aspects of the pandemic, and here's this, people are masked, and what's happening, and we're in lockdown, and all that. It's this capturing of, again, the city, and I wouldn't say necessarily a death, but a metamorphosis. And I mentioned that in my statement, where we're in this paradigm shift. And I do truly believe that, and I believe that we've accelerated that. The pandemic has accelerated that. And so, yeah, I found when I stepped back after our final selections, I saw threads of my own life. And again, the question comes to me, is is this because I'm a resident of the city? Is this because I have emotional attachments to, say, anything that we would call nostalgia? And I don't really like nostalgia, even though it's kind of ironic being somebody that works in history. But, it's that connection and this idea that these pictures are helping to document a city that is shifting. That at the end of, whenever we declare, okay, pandemic's over, and I don't know how we're going to do that, but it seems like people want to declare at some point, that this will be a distinctly different place in subtle fashions and other fashions than it was in February of 2020. But again, then the question beckons, wouldn't that happen normally? We all change every single 12 months, and every 24 months, and every 36 months. So, again, it just gave me kind of an idea to reflect on that, and then also being somebody that clearly knew the museum and somebody that works with history every day, that really is part of the excitement of the show as well. Is that we're able to document these little micro details of this change right now, because that's the type of thing that's so important, and it's the type of thing that gets glossed over when the canon of history kind of comes into place.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that neither one of you are visitors. You're parts of the city in a way that a pizza goer is not. I'm just going to show some examples of his work. But here we have this, historic place on the street of New Haven. This might be less obvious to somebody here than when you start to get into something like this. Daggett Street, is this kind of infamous area for people that came or have been in New Haven for a long period of time. I know that I have my history of memories that came from Daggett Street, and I'm sure that anybody who's been here probably 20 years plus, I think Daggett Street was kind of one of those areas you talked about that's kind of dropping out. But
exactly. No, that's a prime example. Again, it's like I definitely have a connection to that place. And that is an example as well of like a city that's changing. We're the new Daggett Streets today. We're the new Daggett Streets that are going to come in 5 years. So that's kind of that idea of this shift.
So you're a curator at not an art gallery but a museum, and I think there's a relatively large difference in the idea of understanding, studying, loving the place itself over and above how that information is put together on a two-dimensional, photographic frame. The idea of the anchor, this iconic place. Can you talk to me about the connection that you saw in his work, where one aspect is historic, and the other aspect is this remarkable ability to make a picture out of something that's something that we all know as a person coming from New Haven, and how those two things meld together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that comes at the core of what I feel is Rod's passion and talent in his photography. It's just, as you mentioned, is how he can frame a shot, and in something that's so, he does it so well that it's seamless. It's almost effortless. It has that familiarity, but dreamlike at the same time. And this has that feel of, it's familiar. And in documenting just this one scene here, you have a person on a bike on the sidewalk, which is, if you live in New Haven or any sort of city environment, that's a contentious thing, but you have that happening. You have the year and make of the bike, so that's a detail from history. You have the mask on the person's face because they're out in public. This is, even if you want to break it down to a level where this is before, this photo was taken during a period where it was like wear masks everywhere, not just indoors. But then you have behind it the anchor spot. You have a place that has also shifted. A place that went from, has a strong connection to residents, townies, if you will, to Yaleys. Really, actually, kind of a real mixing ground of the city, the town gown aspect, and then that's shifted, and that was like a controversy. I don't know how many years ago now. Was it 5? It's under 10. But, now it's a different version of itself. It's not the same anchor that we may have all known and loved 10, 15 years ago. And so right there in that photo, you have these all these subtle shifts. And I look out of the corner too. You get a doorway. You get the street lamp. You get this kind of weird tree that's just meh. And then you get a little peek at the owl shop. And the owl shop too is another steadfast piece of New Haven, a piece of New Haven history that's been here and is continuing. So you have all these aspects just here, and at the same time you have this barrenness. You do have this feel of just there's life, but less, paused. So there's a lot happening in each photo. And it appeals on both levels. It appeals on that level of actual enjoyment and aesthetic enjoyment, and on the recording of this moment in history, and for posterity's sake, where we are right now in the 2020s.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that I know his work. I've known his work for a long time. We've known each other for a very long time. A lot of the images you picked are also are iconic places. Mamoons. It's just there from the second I came to New Haven. I don't know what the first 2 a.m. visit to Mamoons was in my life, but it is a memory that is not purposefully lost. And you chose a lot of these. They're put together, these images. If you look at the last, if you look at this image and the play of that tree off the lines of the window, and how this plays into this yin and yang form that's taking place inside the frame. He still has all that going, but he's also adding these kind of iconic places that really define what New Haven is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was also an intent as well. It's knowing the collection. I work on a daily basis with the photograph collection, with our collections here at the museum. And, admittedly, we have gaps. And, for instance, these iconic places, and I'm glad you mentioned that as such, because they're iconic to us and, may not be represented. To my knowledge, this is the first time we've seen Mamoons in all its glory here from the street in the New Haven Museum. Not for any lack of I wouldn't say prejudice might be a strong word, but just because. So it's able, this show too is able to show again these icons of the New Haven that people know and love. It's not just kind of like this preserved tower, pedestal of a canon of history.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring in some reference to other photographers in what I always think about when I look at Rod's work. This is Atget on the left. He's credited certainly as being the father of street photography. And the ideas behind his work was interestingly, he was recording Paris. He had this energy to get out there day after day after day and record this posterity, if you will, or this shift that he knew would take place in his own city. Mm-hmm. And, here we have Rod doing the same thing. The interesting part is I see a lot of connections between the way that both of them organize their frames, the movement of how, Atget's image pulls you into the frame. Well, the same thing is taking place with this white line that comes across and pulling you into the middle of this frame. And I think it's absolutely wonderful when you look at Atget and then moving into a person like Steichen. Steichen is credited with the really transforming photography into an art form. I don't think Rod is exemplifying what I like to teach students, in that he's not taking a picture of something to see what it looks like when you take a picture of it. He's going beyond that. He is utilizing what's in front of him to make his own new vision, the control of the frame, all of the things he chooses to put in and chooses to crop out and chooses to organize within that frame is giving us something different than the expanse of our own view outside when we walk down the street. Yeah, there's Mamoons, but there's also that weird little house to the left, and there's that driveway to the right, and that weird Yale thing, and all that's lost, where it becomes this teeny little beautiful scene of Mamoons, captured in this light and captured with this strong line coming into the frame. So I wonder, Rod, can you start us off? Like, what is, first of all, your energy and you get up every single day, and you've been doing this over this, and I think the massive energy started kind of with COVID, where I think everybody else was inside and we were, we're afraid to go out, and we're sitting there, and we really got into television, and Netflix became very popular, and Rod's outside freezing. So tell us what got you.
Well, part of it is just the, it was with the advent of COVID and everybody being shut in. It was sort of the only thing that I could do to stay sane, to get out of the house, to do something. And a lot of people were scared about going outside in the early days, and I think I was either foolhardy or I kind of knew that it was and I think I was taking a calculated risk, because we didn't really understand how transmissible COVID was in the very beginning. But I knew that if I, that it was, for my own sanity, I just had to go out. And I've always, either thought about taking pictures, or I've had a camera with me, if only my cell phone, for instance, just in the past few years. When I started taking these photographs, I wasn't really terribly serious about it. And it wasn't until maybe the summer of, I guess 2020, after sort of the first wave subsided, that I started really going whole hog and going out every single day, pretty much every single day, with my little camera, documenting things that I saw. And originally it wasn't so much that I was trying to document New Haven in the times of COVID. It was just that so much of New Haven suddenly was available to see because there was so little traffic on the streets and so many people, few people on the streets, that I was able, all these buildings that you see all the time were suddenly revealed, so that you could get a photograph that was almost impossible. Like that one photograph of that you just showed us of the Anchor Spa, for instance, almost always has a car parked in front of it. In fact, I think that's kind of the case now, that things are sort of
now it's got like all those lanes and all that stuff. It's
yeah. I mean, and it's just it probably, you'll almost probably never ever be able to take that photograph again. I was just lucky that one day there was nothing there, and it was, because of COVID, there was very little traffic, and I got it. And so, and a lot of these things, the same thing with that picture of the Cafe 9 that I took, which is a personal favorite of mine. So yeah, no, and then as it went on, I started thinking, this really is a document about New Haven in the times of COVID. And so it kind of germinated into this. Yeah,
I love this photo.
That one, I just love that because of its just stark simplicity.
Yes.
The building itself is a very stark building. There's not a lot of adornment to it. It's just brick and lintels and windows and some sort of electrical wiring or whatever, and then the sidewalk and nothing else. And that very simple sign over the door,
yep.
Cafe 9. And also particularly, I mean, it was sort of strong, low afternoon light that gave it that feel, that kind of very crisp, bright feel to it, which is that all those factors came together to make it one of my favorite photos. And a lot of people sort of scratch their heads, is like, there's nothing going on. Well, yeah, right. That's kind of the point. Sorry,
I said there's so much going on. You and I discussed,
there's nothing going on, and there's a lot going on at the same time. Yeah, absolutely. There's
so many little details in it that make it wonderful and come together, and then also this emotional attachment. Where you see kind of one of New Haven's favorite places. Some place that you would. Everybody's ended up at one point or another closed, quiet, like this longing for like a, Friday night or Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, what have you.
And I think you're right about the little details, and it's the little details of the city that, the three of us live in here in New Haven, that reveal themselves in the total quiet of at least the first few months of lockdown and COVID and so forth. So yeah, no, I understand what you mean, because like normally there'd be like chairs out front and people walking by, and then the roof of a car or whatever, and it would just totally destroy what is behind all of this, which is just the building itself, with this very nice arrangement of 12 windows and the simple sign over the doorway, and that's it. And I it's one of my faves.
So I'm gonna take it back a notch. Historically, Atget, I don't know if he considered himself an artist. He was actually selling a lot of his work to painters who wanted to, they were the artists, and he was just kind of, supplying these things. I'm not actually sure we would know anything about Atget had it not been for Bernice Abbott finding the, half-broken negatives on the street after he died. You, in a kind of similar fashion early on, you are not this, you don't sell yourself very flamboyantly. You're this quiet, wonderful, and if it weren't, I often kind of think if it wasn't for social media, I don't know what we would know about Rod Topping either. And if I could hop back to Jason, I think you mentioned how did you learn about his work? I mean, certainly it wasn't from the massive amount of exhibitions that he had in Manhattan, although I think those are in the future.
There you go. No, absolutely. I mean, you could say definitely social media. And again, this, living in a small town. New Haven's a small town. I've known Rod. Cross circles, bumped into each other here and there for 15 years or so. So it's just that. It's that small sense of community that's still a wonderful thing about this city, and even as it's growing and changing. And so, really, I had been casually watching his photography, and as he's posted it, and as he shared it, and always enjoyed it. Always enjoyed it. It immediately connects with me. Mentioning the fact that yes, he doesn't sell himself as an artist per se, which is beyond refreshing, and that's also what made this project as well. This wonderful kind of just really like a fun. This has been a fun, and I mean it completely genuinely, project because of that, because of this sort of lack of an artistic stance or ego or what have you. Not to say if you wanted to have an ego, right, wouldn't be unmarried, it's like, but no, it's just, so there's that excitement, and it was this really, it boiled down to I do love these photos. I'm so excited too for what you've done since that point and like where you're going. And so it's really a wonderful opportunity to get this chance to work with somebody who is producing great work at this point and is growing and shifting and changing and is a great guy to just talk to and hang out with. This is good.
Well, likewise, Jason. Thank you very much for saying that. I enjoyed doing it too, and I love the way it all came together. Back to your point about Paul, about if it had not been for social media, I might not have really gotten my work out there where people were like either sort of noticing it and getting feedback. And I hate to admit it, but I think you're right. I started putting stuff on Instagram, I don't know, well, gosh, I think it was maybe 10 years ago, but I really poo-pooed it. I thought it was ridiculous. And then I started just sort of like, but back in the maybe 5-6 years ago, I really wasn't working that much, but I was occasionally just snapping a photo with my iPhone or whatever and popping it up on Instagram, and it sort of snowballed a little bit. And I have lots of work from before this, but not really a coherent body like that I produced over the past 2 or 3 years. And so anyway,
someday we'll get into that, because you mentioned like you've been doing this for 30 years,
Yeah. So I mean, like as I was saying, it's kind of snowballed into me sort of re-engaging with my very passion for photography that actually goes back into my early teens. Over the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And for that, and believe me, I have my problems with social media and I have my problems with Instagram, but I am grateful to those platforms for helping me in this. I mean, they didn't actively help me, but allowing me to share my work with the wider world without having giant shows and tooting my own horn and whatever. By the way, I also had a little show over at Paul's studio about 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which was a lot of fun, and really got that kind of kickstarted me into thinking about like really aggressively going out and shooting New Haven over the ensuing year and a half, I guess it was. When was that, Paul? Was it like maybe 2 years ago, or a little less than 2 years ago?
I mean, the whole point to that idea was the loss. I felt, inherent loss of my experience, where I go into galleries and I experience the work and I experience people and I experience all, and it was lost. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to build a gallery on the sidewalk. Let them walk by.
Yeah, which was a brilliant idea.
Keep those, just slow down the pizza goers for a teeny bit to enjoy some work and possibly gain some interest from people who wouldn't normally walk into a gallery. We're here, it's not like I'm forcing it on them, but they're walking down the street and they can enjoy an exhibition of work. And given the fact that you're all, this beautiful body of New Haven work, I think it was even, a greater kind of collaboration. Based on that, let me ask you, so I think it's very hard to remove an artist from an artist's work. I think there's an element of, I've been doing this quite a few years myself, and people are like, they often ask me, how are you going to photograph me? And, my common answer is, actually, I'm not. I'm going to photograph myself. I'm just going to use you to do it. So you have this body of work, and there is a striking amount of these interesting, I'm not going to say lonely, but it is true. The COVID has created this emptiness, but you have gone out of your way to capture one individual in the emptiness over and over and over again. And I'm wondering, to you, emotionally, like, is this, I don't think it's just straight organization of form. How do you feel about your own work and how it represents yourself?
Well, I mean, I don't, when I take pictures, I either don't include people in my photographs, or if I do, they are a small element of the photos. Now in the case of the photo that you have on the screen right now, and the one that you just popped up of the guy walking across the bridge, they are essential elements of the photographs. Without those people, this one of the bridge would be mildly interesting. I mean, I probably wouldn't give it a second look. And the other one, the guy with the white hat on the green, would just be, sort of, that's another night shot in New Haven. If you're asking me, I guess you're asking me if I sort of identify with sort of single people on the street, kind of in their own world, not interacting with anybody else. Do I identify with those people? Yeah, I guess I do. That's not necessarily why I took the pictures.
I kind of wonder whether, like, when I go out and photograph, I can often find, I can find out what I'm thinking about, or I can find out how I feel, or I can find out, it's a subconscious element to taking pictures. I should probably practice more mindfulness, because photography has become that mindfulness yoga experience. And I was just wondering, your work, there's, when you photograph at night, some people photograph at night, and there's, it's less personal. It's hard to explain, but there's a personal element to the way where I feel looking at your work. I feel an emotional attachment when it's happening over and over again to the artists themselves. Where if you had one single picture of something, okay, nice that you placed that person and filled that spot. But I wonder if you're conscious in any way, do your pictures change as you go out? Some nights, it's been, I don't know, 10 degrees out there. How has your pictures changed by being frozen?
I'm gonna I mean, in the past few days, when in the intense cold, Paul, I have to confess I actually haven't gone out and taken pictures. But
forget it, cut the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I was sort of getting a little annoyed with myself that I was just taking such static photographs. And I was like, well, I can maintain that same flavor of just the stillness of a moment and have people in the photograph. And this is an excellent example. 3 years ago, I would have just taken that picture without the guy standing at the bus stop. And if I'm not sure about this, but I'm pretty sure I recall walking down the street, seeing this, reflection of the windows. So by the way, this image is a little hard to read. It's actually reflections coming from the windows across the street at the British Art Center. Mm. Looking at that and thinking that would be a cool photo, but then not taking it because I thought it was a little obvious. And then coming back a few minutes later in the other direction, and there was this guy at the bus stop, and then I was just like, bang, that's the picture I wanted. These individuals don't necessarily take away from the stillness of the photo, but I think they make it a lot more interesting and a lot more human. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have, especially in the past year and a half, I've been sort of consciously trying to include at least some kind of human activity in my photographs. I'm actually, one thing about me is I'm extremely, I'm kind of shy. I'm reluctant to just go up to somebody and say, oh, do you mind if I take your picture? I mean, I have done it in the past. And some photographers are not shy about just going up into people's faces and taking their pictures without even asking, which I can't do that. For one thing, I'll get beat up. So that shows in my photos. I'm not a big people photographer person.
You're not taking portraits per se.
Yeah, and by the way, that's something that is something that I would like to pursue. Like actually doing portraiture. I've never really been comfortable with it, but that's a reason to pursue it, right? Not more comfortable with it. And I I know so many people in New Haven, and I would love to just go and take photographs of people in their surroundings and and document stuff like that. I know, maybe I will. I don't know.
It has me thinking something that you said too in this process, that you're not a you're not a documentarian. You don't feel that way, but at the same time, you are. And especially getting people into the images. And again, coming from a perspective of as a historian, those things too are those are the subtle things that you can see 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. It's like, oh, what was the cut of his pants? What was the style of his facial hair? What was the style of his coat? Just like aside from just, the expression, the waiting for a bus. It's a pandemic.
Well, I mean, that's absolutely the thing. That's absolutely the thing that I enjoy about looking at historical photos is especially of places that I know, and I see this on New Haven Museum's website all the time. Your photos that people have taken 100 years ago or something, or 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, even, and I mean, it's just there's just endless fascination in looking at these things. Looking at not only how people were dressed, or what cars they were driving, or the details on buildings, or but just like how people are standing.
Yeah.
You know,
What you find often with that too is it's the humanizing aspect of it.
right? Yeah.
Look at how somebody's standing in a photo 100 years ago. So say that same location would be quite different 100 years ago. But take a corner on the green, something like that. Say Chapel and College, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
The Taft. You'll see people. The more you look at it, you realize people are standing there like, or fidgeting, like, their hands in their pockets, doing something, because people are people. Like, we change in little subtle ways and this and that, and but inherently humans are human. And then you start noticing these details, and that's what's interesting in working in history and looking at photos like this and how you're capturing it. Because as I go back to this idea of the canon, what becomes history? And often a lot of that too now is how things are presented. Imagery is presented through film and through TV and through what have you. And I can't tell you how many times it drives me nuts to watch a period, and it can be something from the 90s, and I'll notice I'm like, nope, like those shoes didn't exist in the 1990s. Nope, like that shirt detail is wrong. And that's just a subtle thing, people just throw in like, I don't know, I think that poster was from then. It looks old timey. Let's put it in here. But that's then the thing that we all were like, oh yeah, that must be how it was. It's like take the film Woodstock, about Woodstock. It's like, oh, that's how Woodstock was. That's how hippies were. And it's like, no, it's literally a film with a certain intent made about a certain festival and a certain iconic thing, but it's become iconic. And then people say it speaks for an entire generation and for an entire decade. No, it really was a piece of art with a certain intent, but that's how we consume things. And so that's what's really interesting too in these details that you're capturing. And it's something that personally draws me into your work as well. And it's not just in people. You have an especially strong eye for architecture, which is also, a love of mine. So, it's that, that sense as well. The architectural details, just the simple details of living, how people place the chairs on their porch, what the chairs, because that's the juice, that's the stuff. And that's the stuff that it all becomes like kind of in the background of our minds. And we don't really pull it out with details, but it pops in there once in a while, and you have a distant memory. And you're like, this seems familiar. And then you remember. It's like, oh yeah, that was my grandmother's weird blanket that she used to put on, like when she was taking a nap. You don't think about that thing for 40 years, but one day it comes back. These things all become blurry, and it's tricky. So having these documents, that, you're being a great historian, Rod. you're for posterity's sake.
I like to think that people will be able to look at my photos maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now or whatever, and react the same way that I react when I look at pictures from the 50s or the 40s or the 60s or the 20s or whatever, there's this always in the back of my mind when I'm taking a picture of anything, like, oh, what is somebody, even if it's a completely mundane picture of a fire hydrant or something, like, well, it's, somebody in, 2102 might look at that and be like, oh, wow, that's how they made those fire plugs back then.
Right.
Just dumb stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it sort of comes to the, like I can't decide whether this is a more of a documentary exercise, an artistic exercise. I think it's a little bit of both. um I don't like to run around calling myself an artist, but I guess to a certain degree I am. um um eh, I but when I'm taking these photos, I think, and I am fairly careful about how I compose things, line things up, and organize things within the frame. Uh, so that's the artistic side of things. But I'm also like, es- especially with this body of work here, I'm thinking uh, probably more. Oh, I need to take a picture of this building because I've never taken a picture of this building, or like here's a beautiful picture. Here's Cafe Nine. Like I'm never going to see it again, but I've never seen it before, and I'll never see it like this again. And I'm going to take that picture, and and same thing with the church on the green there with the peeling paint behind your left shoulder, or I guess it's your right shoulder.
So
Um,
based on that, you have this history, you have this recording. There's an honesty to it, but then it brings up another point, and I'm curious what the difference is in your mind. Quite often, I do not see an exhibition where this takes place. Black and white and color mixed
yeah,
same area. And by the way, I think it works. I think it works very well. But I'm interested in um, your thoughts on the matter of when you make something black and white, when you make it color. Do you believe, I'm not sure, I've always been wrestling with this. Do you believe that a great picture would be great whether it's in black and white or color? It's a choice
well,
at the end of it, but it's pretty much a great picture regardless. So anyway, you've chose to mix some color in with this. Um,
I mean, there are a couple things. First of all, um, I think these photos are 36 images. It was just nice to break it up with a color image every now and then. And then there are some images I think mainly in black and white. I mean, I think it really just goes back to I was trained um, to photograph in black and white and think in black and white. And um, I mean, actually, back in the day when I was in college and taking photography courses, color was sort of kind of looked down upon a little bit, which is silly. Um, but it's just sort of my natural impulse to shoot and think in black and white. That being said, by the way, these are all digital photographs. All the photographs that I take are in color. It's just that when I edit them, I desaturate them. Now, this is an excellent example that you picked here, Paul. The picture on the right would not be a terribly interesting picture if it was in black and white.
Right.
I mean, it's the whole point of the picture. It's like these two, it's this one doorway or sort of, entryway to two separate buildings that are attached. Apparently owned by two owners who have very different tastes in in how they paint their properties. So, and I just thought that was amazing and sort of humorous, and so and whimsical, and how could I not take that picture? The picture on the left, which is also another picture I love, of I think it's Salon Lulu on Chapel Street.
The English building.
The English, yes, that's right. It's right above the English Market.
Yep.
Uh I love the sort of messed up Venetian blinds, and then the classic sort of arched windows there, and then the little portholes on top.
Yeah. It has a classic, like very noir, very,
Yeah,
like there's
yeah,
something going on inside that building. We might find out, but we might not.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if I could, if I showed you that picture in color, it would be immediately less interesting.
Right.
It would just be dull and kind of Well, for one thing, it would probably be very sort of orangey because of the sodium vapor lights. You know, there's just not, it's like a picture that can only be in black and white.
Mhm.
And the picture to the right there can only be in color. So, you know, for those who haven't seen the show, what do you think? I have maybe 4 or 5 pictures in color.
There was one, I'm sitting in the gallery now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically the intent was about 1 for each wall. One wall ended up with 2.
Yeah.
And, you know, you and I went back and forth with that idea. And, you know, again, that was kind of the idea that it gets broken up and there's a playfulness with that too. Aside from the fact that they look great and they fit in, yeah, you don't expect it, you know, by this idea of sort of a gallery show, sort of there's rules and it's set in stone. Oh, it's a black and white show. It can be both. It can be fine if it works. We didn't do it for the sake of, you know, to mess with you. But, you know, if you find it unexpected, good. That means you're engaging, at least from my perspective as a curator and putting on displays as well. I want to keep people engaged and also, you know, make their brains work a little bit and stay in the room longer to absorb and take a little more time. Which is something that's a pressing people's attention spans. I mean, hopefully people are watching this far. You know, it's like people's attention spans are fleeting. And so yeah, for me, in the actual physical display of objects, yeah, I like to see little playful things, something that I wouldn't expect. Because also, you know, I go see a show someplace, and I'm like, oh, would you look at that? Like, you know, or I might find it annoying. Be like, oh. But at least I'm engaged. I'm thinking, and you know, you go back, and that's part of what I like to think about too, in the idea of any sort of display. It's like, okay, if somebody's thinking about this an hour later, 2 days later, a year later, we won. You know, that means, you know, they may hate it, they may love it, but at least it's considered more, and then you may go back. You may learn more. You may go to Rod's website, you know, you may follow him on Instagram. You may, you know, you may unfollow. I don't know. But at least there was an action.
Yeah.
So in terms of attention span, I'm glad you brought it up. There is also an element which is very refreshing and very different in this, where there is a recording of the time in which we are in, the exact moment in time, the elements of Black Lives Matter. I'm hoping we can hold on to that. I'm hoping it doesn't turn into Sandy Hook and forgetting about, you know, shooting kids because, you know, we need to have our guns or whatever it is. This element of recording history in the here and now is a remarkably interesting part of the exhibition, because it's not recording past, it's recording the here and now. You know, there's so much locked into this picture. There's COVID, there's this Black Lives Matter, there's the, you know, kind of emptiness of it, and your kind of whimsical way of dead center putting the word garden. It's like, oh yeah, living the dream. People keep saying it during the COVID. And this, not unlike, you know, this image, I think it's absolutely brilliant in the elements that come into it, in the way that it's locking into the news of the day, if you will. And then this one, and there's a, you know, a couple of absolute gems in terms of photographs that are capturing the now. And I wonder if you could, you know, this is absolutely remarkable photo in my mind. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the breakdown of, I was actually with Rod on this day, Worcester Square Park, fascinating day in the COVID year. But can you tell us a little bit about this picture and what you were thinking and what the
Well, this is an interesting picture. Number one, it's one of my favorites. And you're right. It was actually that was a dramatic day on the on Worcester Square when they actually finally removed the Christopher Columbus statue. And earlier before that was actually removed, there was a little bit of there were some tussles between people who were angry about the statue being removed and people who were there to celebrate his departure. And I kind of walked around and I wasn't really thinking in terms of documenting it in any sort of photojournalistic way. And I was actually I remember being kind of unsettled. I mean, there was just a lot of bad feeling in the air, and I didn't particularly really want to go around just sort of taking pictures willy-nilly. um and uh so I took a few pictures. I don't know, I think maybe I took maybe 50 photos or 100 photos or something. And most of them are just sort of people standing around. I should probably actually go through them and look at them again and see if there are any others that stick out to me now that I have a little bit of time between now and when this happened. But anyway, this one photograph, I was just standing on the other side of Chapel Street, and I reacted to it like, oh, well, there's a big bronze statue being hauled away in a flatbed trailer, and that in and of itself, no matter what the context, is kind of an interesting photograph.
Yeah.
you know and so I took it, and I didn't really think much of it. And I got home, I didn't think, I was sort of like disappointed about the light of the day, and it was kind of, I don't know if you remember, Paul, it was sort of a gray, sort of wet, overcast day, and so the light wasn't really very dynamic. And it wasn't until I sort of looked at it again and I realized, well, and then, never mind about the light. I mean, here's this very strange scene of a 125-year-old bronze statue on the back of a flatbed trailer with a whole bunch of people looking at it. And then right behind it, almost as if in line, coming from the left to the right, you have this burly policeman with his his arms on his hips, and of course he's wearing a mask.
Hmm.
And then I was like, oh well, that's actually, that is a record of the time. And the more I looked at it, the more I liked it, and it's now become one of my favorite images.
Yeah.
Actually,
So
there's a color version and a black and white going back to that. And this is
Mhm.
one too that we want, the black and white definitely conveys a whole different emotion from the color. But yeah,
Mhm.
this is one of those kind of quicksilver moments that you captured.
Yeah. One thing that I've always liked about black and white is that there's a little bit of I feel like black and white is more of a transcription of reality, you know, um, in the same way that maybe a drawing is a transcription.
Hmm.
Although maybe that's not the best comparison. Uh, Whereas color is more of a direct echo of that reality, and I really appreciate that little bit of a distance, right? That little bit of separation. And for
It gives
me,
instant memory in a way. It's that idea of like I was
yeah,
mentioning before, that idea of how memory works in a way. It instantly creates a sort of, yeah, as you said, a distance. Um,
yeah,
so the way our brains kind of like think about the past in a way.
yeah.
yeah,
So oh yeah, that's another one of my faves. For those that are wondering, that is the Eli building, which is on, I think it's Church Street at
That's
that
on
point.
Church Street, on the corner, basically the corner of Church and Elm,
Right, yeah, Church and Elm.
give or take.
Kind of like yeah, going down towards Grove.
Yes.
Um and this is, I believe that used to be the old SNET building, Southern New England Telephone, and it's got turned into these luxury apartments. Yeah, in front of it is, there's this man sitting in a wheelchair, and I'm not sure, I can't remember what the Oh, thanks. You can blow it up a little bit. Yeah. And you can see he's wearing a mask. Another one of my sort of photos of just stark architectural straight on shot, but with a human element to it, but just a single one.
And you also don't have to be, we don't have to write a guidebook to tell you what's going on here between,
Yeah.
the luxury apartments and, a person who, and I'm not going to say maybe they can't afford it, but most likely we can intuit from this, cannot afford to live in this building, which is something that, again, the backdrop of modern times and modern New Haven, and that's speaking to that as well as this growing gap. And it's not just here, as I've said, I was saying to Paul earlier, and just in general, we're seeing this across the country. But being at this New Haven Museum, and we'll talk about New Haven, you can see that that gap is growing, and the question mark behind it. If we become a city where you can only afford to spend $2,500 a month on a bedroom, on a studio apartment, what does that say about our community?
Yeah.
Will we still have places like Cafe 9? Will we still have Daggett Streets?
Well, it's certainly I live on a fairly famous street who's being overrun by a massive amount of apartments right at the base of Worcester Street, and I definitely wonder. I'm on Worcester Street because of it's a small neighborhood, and it's now a small neighborhood if you have enough money to live here.
Yes.
Not, so I'm just going to move forward in the idea of time. I really want to get through more of this work. There's another thing that I think is very noteworthy about Rod's ability to photograph nothing and make something incredible about it. He's not I've always had this. People are going to go nuts. I'm not against Ansel Adams, but Ansel Adams never took a picture of the garbage pile in his backyard and made it look incredible. He took pictures of Yosemite National Park, and they were beautiful. My argument is they were beautiful before he got there. His organization was incredible. Yes. More importantly is bringing the zone system into our art form and the control of the process of photography. But Rod has the ability to take relatively simple, everyday things and organize them into a kind of very clean grandeur. There is nothing particularly special about these two houses, but the cleanliness and the way that you frame them and the lines and the the placement within the square. You're very conscious of photographing in a square instead of a vertical or a horizontal, and making use of it instead of it just being there. And this, over and over, you have other examples of this. Sometimes it's details and sometimes it's the entire place, but the thing itself is not remarkable. The picture is. You've transformed. I wonder if you could say a little bit about your thought process. I mean, this is a house.
Yeah.
But it's no longer a house. So what did you see? You walked up to this. You took this picture on this beautiful sunny day.
Yeah. I think this photograph was a lot about, aside from the fact that it's kind of a cool house.
It's a nice house.
Sorry?
It's a nice house.
Yeah. It's
a nice house.
Yeah. This photo to me was more about the light. It was one of those days that they call, severe clear. It was brilliant, beautiful, gorgeous light. maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I forget what time of year this was. I think it was probably early summer of 2020. I'd have to look back, but
July 4th, 2020.
what?
July 4th, 2020.
Okay, so middle. I'm not far off. That would have been embarrassing if it was January or something. No, it what struck me when I saw this was, first of all, it was a very interesting building. By the way, this is on St. Ronan Street, I think it might be Edgehill Avenue. Anyway, it's in it's the pretty much the fanciest neighborhood in New Haven, and I just walked down that street once in this whole, past 2 years that I've been taking these photographs. But this one, I was struck by the light, and I was struck by the form of the building, and I just said, let me just take a photograph of it dead straight on. And sure enough, when I converted it to black and white, it's funny you bring up Ansel Adams, Paul, because Ansel Adams, more than anything else, I mean, I love Ansel Adams. I particularly love Ansel Adams when you actually go and look at the actual prints, because he was such a master technician. And this is a sort of thing that I feel like he was doing successfully, and this is sort of an attempt at that, which was just to look at a scene, sort of interpret all the tonal values, and then photograph it, and then turn it out in such a way as to convey what he felt he saw at the time. I think he called it pre-visualization or visualization, something like that, Paul. Yeah.
Pre-visualization.
Pre-visualization. And, it was a whole thing where you look at something and then you decide what kind of filter you're going to use. Of course, he was shooting in black and white, black and white plates or film sheets. And he was thinking about filtering, and he was thinking all through the entire process of the final print before he even tripped the shutter. Right. Well, I mean, I certainly didn't do that, but I was looking at this and thinking, whenever I'm taking pictures of architecture where there's light that's this glorious, I'm always thinking along those lines of like, wow, that'll make a really beautiful print. And in this case, it did. Now, the other one is not like that at all. The one of the decrepit building. So it's, yeah, can you make it go to the next one? That one is actually fairly dull light. So it wasn't so much about, oh, is it going to be a beautiful print? But it is a remarkable building in the sense that it's definitely faded glory. It still is a beautiful building in a way, but it's also looks like it's about to cave in on itself, which is the polar opposite of the building the other building, which is in excellent condition. So yeah, I mean, you can look at those two cities and you can look at those two photos and say, oh yeah, Tale of Two Cities or whatever. And I definitely did document this building because I was thinking that it was like, well, this is a testament to, the fact that New Haven is, there are crumbling bits of it. There's crumbling infrastructure all over the place. But, I photographed this more with the idea of documenting that rather than documenting it as a beautiful photograph. But they work well together.
Yeah, they work.
Yeah, but and I was thinking completely different things. This is sort of in between. This one, I just happen to really like the front of this building. I mean, it's crazy, that crazy round arch, and then the detail of the chair up on the above the entryway. That is actually it's on Lake Place, and I believe that's a fraternity house, which would explain the beach chair.
I love the aspect, like the geometry in this photo too. I mean, you mentioned there's the round around the doorway, like almost full circle, But then above it, where the chair is a square. And then if you actually look over to the windows, there's the contrast. So next to the circle, it's more of a square. It's almost kind of rectangular. But then above it, then you have that slight arch on the window above. So it's, this building's really interesting. If you look at the brickwork and how it's like patched on one side, it's not patched. It's, there's actually quite a bit going on within this photo. And, it's fun too at the same time. Again, the chair then it brings your eye to it and kind of throws you off at the same time.
Yeah. That's sort of another example of photographing just for the sake of the light. The paint picking up the very slanted light again, this is probably late afternoon. Also I had a view to making a nice print when I took that photograph. I mean, I seem to remember when I took it kind of thinking, oh, I don't know, it won't be that terribly interesting. But then, again, when you get back and you start editing things and there's a little bit of distance in time between when you're actually looking at it and editing it and when you actually took the photo, on second look, I was like, yeah, that could be cool. Like as a big print because it's so simple.
Yeah.
And yet it's so detailed in other ways.
And at the same time, for the idea of looking at like history, it speaks to this time period right now where organized religion is, the numbers are going down, and this is a church that's positioned on the green. This church has definitely seen its heyday, and it may be in a slight decline at this point, or it's in transition to different purpose, what have you. And that all these little subtleties are captured in this photo, and just really the peeled paint says that. Someone could argue, well, yeah, it's, someone needs to paint that building. Okay, but that's all of a sudden you start thinking about these slight little details that are captured here.
Yeah. I get annoyed when people paint their buildings because then they make the buildings less interesting to photograph.
It's true. It's good justification not paint your house,
Yeah, the car wash. That's on Whaley Avenue. And yeah, that it's a kind of a funny photograph. It's not the sort of thing that I think of immediately when I think in New Haven. I mean, it almost looks like something that you'd see in, well, anywhere in America, but I don't know. I'm like, if you just showed me that picture and said, "Wait, where is this?" I'd probably, I don't know, Los Angeles.
In
But yeah. Oh, sorry.
I said, yeah, I would think of Los Angeles in the 60s. I would think of this as being a Gary Winogrand photograph from back in God knows when. Who would make that now? It would be, clean and, show the times. Yeah. I'm going to keep going through them a little bit. And if you can do us all a favor, tell us just a teeny bit of what you were interested in. I think photography is a scavenger hunt in a way. It's a visual scavenger hunt. And I always tell students, like, find something you enjoy and then make a photograph about it. Don't just take a picture of the thing you enjoy. And I'm curious, as I go through these, what did you see that started the process to making the photograph?
Okay.
So
starting with this one?
Yeah. Start with
this one. Brad, probably just the uniqueness of the building combined with the light. And I also seem to remember being confused about the exit sign over what appeared to be the entrance. So
the back.
Yeah, I guess. I was just warning people not to stand right in front of there to get run over. And I guess I figured that out, but it's normally you see the exit sign on the other side to tell you that this is the way out. Anyway, I just like the photo. I knew that it would be an interesting photo because of the light and because of the sort of historical nature of the building. Like you said, Paul, they probably threw that up in the 60s, right? Sure, looks like it. That sort of.
Oh yeah.
The idea behind that building too, and this is something too that's going to, mark my words, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that building will, if it's still there, will be different. And that's what's great. That street, Whaley Avenue is zoned. That's probably the remainder of an old auto dealership, what have you. That was how Whaley Avenue, that's why all the buildings are set back. It became the auto alley of the city. And so the city's in the process of rezoning that area. So, you're going to find that new construction as it goes in and changes will bring back buildings closer to the curb. So, and that gives that sense too of like, any place in America, any sort of strip mall-y type thing, because when you think about land usage, generally that's a criticism. It's like, okay, yeah, the McDonald's is parked way back on the lot, kind of thing. It creates more parking space. It creates blah, 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 So yeah, it captures that moment that's going to change.
So this image is, again, one of those days when I was like, I walked out the door and I was like, oh, I couldn't get some nice pictures today because it's, it's just, again, it was like a beautiful blue sky and probably, I don't know what time I shot it, but probably late in the afternoon. And this happens to be actually a abandoned house right across the street from where I live. And I was immediately drawn to, you see that the shadow on the in the lower third of the image, there's a shadow. I guess it's a separation of the two buildings across the street, which sort of forms a kind of diagonal, which leads you up to the guy who's walking down the street and up through his leg. And then you can draw a line at 90 degrees from the right to the edge of the image, to the roof line. And then you have the roof line on the other side going down, sort of echoing that line. And you have the kind of fortuitously located bush there with the flowers on it, and the sky and the trees. And there's a lot going on this photo. It's just another favorite of mine.
They talk a lot about diagonals in photographs and the power of diagonals in photographs. And this is what I'm talking about compositionally, that just consistently is going on throughout your pictures. That it's leading line to the definition of leading line. You're leading from one object to the next object and I could do this to any single one of these images. They're not stagnant, and they can't be because of what you've included and what you've cut out of the picture, where you've created these elements that will lead the individual's eyes as they go through them. I'm going to keep going here. Let's see. Let's hit you again with another one here. Okay. Whoops.
This is fun. Oh yeah, checks cashed. Another Whaley Avenue classic. Yeah, that's another one of the ones that I decided to do in color. And I think the sort of the change in that line from sort of a blue to kind of a salmon colored red, if you're going, yep, right, combined with the shadow from the awning over the M&M check cashing sign, and then the blue sky, just to me it worked better as a color image. And
the empty parking lot,
the empty parking lot. I mean, it's a check cashing place. When you see a check cashing place, it tells you a lot about the neighborhood that you're in. And unfortunately, New Haven many parts of it are depressed. And so that's a document of that. I also I like the fact that there's absolutely nobody in it, right? That it's empty, like you said. The parking lot is empty. There's nobody there. It's still, and yeah, no, another favorite of mine.
This is a really interesting picture, and there is nothing in this picture I care about. Nothing whatsoever. Couldn't possibly care less about check cashing. I'm not into simply historical reference of Western Union, but the amount of different ways you've caused me to come into this photograph and push me from one element to another element to another element. And then at the end, I'm like, oh yeah, it's just a check cashing building. That's, yeah, I think it's wonderful. Let me keep going over here.
Yep. That one also color, and the reason I had to make it color because of the dramatic contrast here between the very cool white light underneath the garage there, and the very, very warm sodium vapor lights in the two parking levels on top of the garage. And also it just so happened that the guy walking through the center of the frame is wearing kind of a bright red shirt, which just kind of ties the whole thing together. And without, in black and white, I think it would just be a boring photo.
Yeah, great. Very cool. Yeah. Moving
on. Another example, lots of color going on there, very yellow. This is for those who haven't been down there. This is the Long Wharf food truck paradise, and it is a riot of music and food and lots and lots of color. And these guys, they make their trucks so playful and festive, and how could I take that photograph in black and white, right? So there was also this very unusual, by the way, those are all lines that had to do with COVID protocols. So you had to sort of like wait in one line to place your order and then stand off to the side, socially distance, and then when you get called, you go up and get your burrito or whatever.
That's cool. I did not. That's the first time you mentioned that to me. I never really.
Oh yeah.
Connection. Yeah, that makes total sense then.
Yeah, you see that yellow line with the arrow there? I think that's where you're supposed to go up and wait.
Yeah.
Remember.
What's that? The funny part is, so you have all this complaining. So am I supposed to stand here? Do I stand in between these things? I literally for a while there, I really honestly felt we almost needed the directions that were given to us of where to stand. And I love the fact that this is absurdly complex.
Yes.
With that same idea. And
this is like safety instructions put together by like a toddler.
Not to mention, then you have this element. Okay, you have all these lines, and just right in the middle of it, we're going to stick this crazy thing, which is exactly the same color. Well, do we stand here? But this element, the connection that's taking place right here, is like a really beautiful thing for this, where the arrow is pointing to the connection of this, which is just adding to more of this unbelievable, design elements of different ways to push you through the picture. Just really beautiful of nothing whatsoever. But
everything at the same time, and again, these iconic places, and again, from the perspective of the museum, for better or for worse, we don't have a lot of documentation of the food paradise. Now, here we have that on our walls, that's, again, documented, and it's, moving the canon forward.
I'm kind of hoping that definition of paradise doesn't stick, but so this one for myself, I really wanted to get into this one. It's kind of there's a clear reason why I wanted to shoot this one out as one of the last images. The notion of the way that you'll use a metaphor inside of an image, representing COVID. This show inherently is still about COVID. It's still about this weird thing that took place in all of our lives. We're not going to forget it. We might have been expecting 3 months. Well, now we're looking at years, and here it is. We are surviving this impossible time, and that pathetic little plant is trying so hard to survive and thrive in an impossible situation. Mm-hmm. The design of the photograph, we can go in endlessly for the lines, the forms, the ability to use, the wiping out of people's graffiti on the wall as an element to the picture and making it more interesting. The perfect way that you lead a line directly towards this plant subject in the center. But then over all of it is this idea of strength, endurance. I don't know. What can you tell me about the photograph?
Okay, well, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't thinking along the lines of the plant as a metaphor when I took it. It was another example of where I'm looking at the light, the texture of the walls, and the unusual positioning of this plant, and it's right being at the precipice of going into shade. That being said, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, you can read it as absolutely a metaphor, especially when you think about the plant being kind of on the verge of moving into the shade. I like the photograph just because of its organization and its sort of whimsical nature, yeah, no, another one of my favorites.
So if I can hop in, there's, and this is said not to the two of you, but to anybody watching this, there is a lot more in this exhibition. There's a complete array adding to everything that we've discussed in this little forum. And I think the understanding of how this stuff fits together and the walls and what's above it and below it, you see the interaction of those things as they come together. The addition of images that you haven't seen here today that are going to be pleasant little surprises that'll add to this forum itself. And I'd like to congratulate you. Both of you guys did a phenomenal job. Rod, keep going.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Paul, and thank you so much for your insights. And you actually made me think about my photographs in ways that hadn't occurred to me.
Thank you. And that said, we are, in doing this program, we're commemorating the fact that the museum is reopening after our little Omicron hiatus here. So we are reopened, and this exhibition is reopened and running through the end of or through into March of this year. So you still have time to catch this show in person, starting the week, February here.
Sorry, did you say that was this coming week?
Yes, we are open as of February 3rd.
February 3rd. Oh, okay, great.
By the time this airs, we are open. And we're open still Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 5. You can make reservations ahead of time, and that's preferred. And masks are required. But yes, we are, the New Haven Museum will be open, and you can see this in person for sure.
Yeah. And by the way, I might add that not only, I mean, my photography here at the museum is a small part of the whole museum. There is an amazing amount of really, really cool stuff to see. You can easily spend a couple of days just going through the exhibits one by one, you know, the permanent exhibits and everything else. It's one of New Haven's gems. And I want to thank you guys so much for reaching out to me and, you know, making this work. And I'm just really happy that we got such a good reception. And then I think that it turned out well. And I encourage anybody who's interested in New Haven to go down and see my photography. Yes, please, and see everything else. And you won't be, it'll be a day well spent.
Thank you. Thank you, Rod. It's been a pleasure through this entire process working with you on this. It's a real pleasure to have Paul here. Paul's
Absolutely.
In the production of the show, and really your perspective today has been really wonderful. It's really fun to talk about this. Be surprised in the questions, and so I appreciate it, and thank you both for your time on this. And again, come down, join us at the New Haven Museum, 114 Whitney Avenue, and you can find us at www.newhavenmuseum.org. You can find us on the socials at Facebook, Instagram, and what's the other one that we do here that begins with a T?
Twitter.
There you go. I don't tweet, but we do at the New Haven Museum. So you can find
Snapchat.
Snapchat, not yet.
WeChat.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, this program is airing on YouTube. So yes, keep it here on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, and there's a lot of new content coming your way throughout this calendar year of 2022. So I want to take time to thank you both. Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Paul. And
thank you, Jason.
Be well. Hopefully the end is near.
Yep. We hope.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. A pleasure.